When people think about the gold rush in Colorado, they almost always picture the same thing, right? There's a man in a creek somewhere, okay, and there he is, and he's bent over a pan. You get the sunlight hitting the water, and there's little flashes of gold swirling around like it's some kind of miracle. And sure, that actually happened. But that's not the whole story, okay? It's not even close. Because once gold showed up in the mountains, right, the miners, well, they weren't the only ones who followed it. Oh no. Gold, it has this strange gravitational pull. It drags in gamblers and saloon keepers, card sharks, whiskey merchants, men looking for fast money, and men running from something, and men who were about to start something. And then, almost like clockwork, the red light district just appears. Now, every serious mining town had one, okay? Sometimes it was just a row of rough cabins on the edge of town. And other times, well, it was something just a little more refined. And that is actually where this story starts, with a woman by the name of Mattie Silks. Now, Mattie Silks wasn't just another working girl in a mining camp. No, she was operating on an entirely different level, okay? Mattie ran parlor houses, right? These were elegant places, piano music drifting through the rooms. You had velvet curtains, polished furniture. It was the kind of place where wealthy mine owners and investors could walk in and forget for a while that outside the door, they were standing in a muddy boomtown just full of dynamite smoking hard rock miners. Now, these were places that were built for men with money. And in the late 1800s, Colorado had a lot of those, because silver and gold, you guys, they were pouring out of the mountains. Now, mining camps were exploding into full-blown towns almost overnight. And the red light district, well, it became one of the most profitable businesses in the entire economy. Now, Mattie Silks understood that better than most people. Accounts, right, from the time, they describe her arriving in town dressed sharply with jewelry, catching the lamplight, and riding it around in a carriage, okay, pulled by matched horses like some kind of frontier aristocrat. She knew exactly who her clients were, okay? Mine owners, investors, high-stakes gamblers, men who could drop more money in one evening than a miner might see in an entire month underground. And Mattie, well, she built an empire around that. But here's the thing about boomtowns. Boomtowns breed competition. Because fast money, it attracts rivals the way that a lantern attracts moths. And Mattie, well, she had a rival. It was another madam, and her name was Katie Fulton. Now, Katie, she ran her own house. She had her own business, her very own circle of wealthy clients, that were just moving through the mining towns and the cities of Colorado. And when you have two powerful madams working the same territory, well, that kind of arrangement, it tends to wear thin, because every man who walked through a door meant money, okay? And every dollar spent in one house was a dollar that didn't land in the other house. So the rivalry between these two women, well, obviously it started to grow. And at first, it was probably just tension, right? Like cold looks across the street and some sharp words, the sort of quiet hostility that builds in places where reputation and territory meant everything. But eventually, things escalated. Now, Mattie Silks, she had a man in her life, right? And his name was Cortez Thomson. He wasn't just a companion to her. No, this man handled the business matters, protection, right? And in a mining town where drunken miners and armed gamblers were just wandering the streets every night, well, that kind of protection, it wasn't an option, right? It was survival. And sometime in 1877, the tension between these rival houses, it finally boiled over. Now, the exact details, they really kind of depend on which old newspaper account that you choose to read. And frontier newspapers, as we know, had a way of embellishing things. But the core, right? The core of the story, very clear. Basically, there was an argument. Voices got louder. Tempers got hotter. And suddenly, a revolver appeared. Cortez Thomson fired the gun. And when the smoke cleared, there she was, Katie Fulton, dead on the ground, shot during the confrontation. Now, even in the Old West, that kind of killing, it had consequences. And the town took notice. The case went to trial. And that's where the story takes one of those strange frontier turns that almost sounds too clever to be even real. So there she is, Mattie Silks, and she takes the stand. And she told the court something that just stopped the entire room cold. She said that Cortez Thomson was her lawful husband. Now, that might not sound like much today, but at the time, it was a full legal shield. Because under the law, okay, a husband and a wife at that time could not be forced to testify against each other when they're in court. It was called spousal privilege. And so when Mattie declared Thomson her husband, she effectively just shut down some of the most damaging testimony that the prosecution was actually hoping to use. This weakened the case exponentially, and the trial dragged on, and we had the jury deliberating, and in the end, Cortez Thomson, well, he was acquitted. Katie Fulton, well, she was still dead, and Mattie Silks went back to running one of the most successful brothels in the West. And the strange machinery of Boomtown life, it just kept turning like nothing had even happened because, well, that's the thing about those mining towns. Below ground, you had men who were just risking their lives, blasting rock and hauling ore out of the mountains. But above ground, you had entire industries growing up all around them. The saloons, the gambling halls, the dance halls, and, of course, the elegant parlor establishments where, well, fortunes could disappear in a single night. Mattie Silks became one of the most famous madams in all of Colorado history, right? You had a woman who built wealth and influence in the same rough frontier economy that made miners rich and ruined them just as quickly. And that murder in that red light district, well, it still sits there in the history of the gold rush like a strange little reminder that the story of those mining towns wasn't just about gold in the ground. No, it was about people, and ambition, and money, competition, and sometimes a gunshot echoing through the night while the rest of the town just kept drinking and the piano kept playing. So if you enjoy stories like this, wild mining camps, frontier crime, and the strange human drama that's just hiding behind the gold rush, well, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. right? So you got to hit the like button, okay? That helps more people who love mining history so that they can find this channel, right? Then you also got to go and you got to turn on the notifications so that you don't miss the next episode. And if you've ever heard a story from an old mining town that just sounds almost too strange to be true, drop it below in the comments. Because in the Rocky Mountains, the deeper that you dig into the history, well, the stranger that the stories actually become. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging this morning. And don't forget, I'll see you on the next one.